Trash belongs with trash. That's what my father announced into the microphone that night, his voice echoing over the crystal chandeliers and the soft murmur of Newport's wealthiest elite. I remember looking at him, feeling my stomach twist into knots as he dangled the old, yellowed passbook, my grandfather's secret gift to me, between his fingers like it was a prize to be mocked. It wasn't just the humiliation. He didn't stop at words. He took the passbook, a fragile thing that smelled faintly of old paper and history, and dropped it straight into a bucket filled with melting ice and champagne. And as the crowd erupted in laughter, my cheeks burned, not from embarrassment, but from the shock of that moment. Everyone laughed. Everyone but me. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. Instead, I did something almost reckless. I plunged my hand into that freezing, sticky mess. I could feel the sting of the ice, the cold water seeping into my veins, soaking the expensive wedding dress I had spent months choosing. I could feel the ruined pages between my fingers, the ink smudging, the paper crumpling. And yet, I held on to them. I couldn't let go. I wouldn't. As I pulled my hand out, dripping wet and shivering, I walked out of that grand hall. I didn't glance back, not once. Behind me, my father's laughter faded into the noise of the party. But inside me, something was awakening, a quiet, cold fury that would not be ignored. Before I tell you what was hidden in those wet, ruined pages, I need you to imagine this. The secret wasn't just money. It was a weapon, a lifeline, and, in time, it would become my way to dismantle my father's fake empire, brick by arrogant brick. 3 days later, I found myself standing in the lobby of the First National Bank in downtown Boston. The building was imposing, marble floors that gleamed, high ceilings that echoed with the soft sound of hushed whispers, a stark contrast to the chaos I had left behind in Newport. I clutched the passbook, now crinkled and stained with champagne residue, inside a Ziploc bag. It looked worthless, just like my father had said. But I knew better. I knew what power those pages held. I am Alyssa Mercer, and at 29, I have spent most of my life making myself invisible. As a trauma nurse, invisibility is a skill. You learn to fade into the background while doctors yell, patients bleed, and life hangs by a thread. You learn to hold secrets, to survive silently. But standing there in my thrifted coat, waiting for the young teller to stop typing, I felt exposed, vulnerable in a way I hadn't felt since childhood. I need to check the balance on this, I said, my voice quiet but steady, sliding the bag across the polished counter. The teller, a girl no older than 20, picked it up delicately, her nose wrinkling as she glanced at the soaking pages. She typed in the account number, probably expecting an error message or a zero balance. But then something happened. Her fingers froze. She leaned closer to the screen, blinking rapidly, and the color drained from her face. "Ma'am," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please wait here. Do not leave." In that instant, I knew she had found something extraordinary. Within seconds, the branch manager appeared, followed by a man in a tailored suit, the regional director. Their eyes weren't on my cheap coat or my unassuming presence. They looked at me like I had just walked out of a legend. "Miss Mercer," the director said, his voice calm but intense. "Please, we've been waiting for this account to be claimed for a very long time." They led me into a private viewing room, the air smelling faintly of old paper and dust. As they retrieved the file, I sat in a leather chair, closing my eyes for a moment. And suddenly, I wasn't in a bank anymore. I was 12 years old again. I was kneeling on the polished hardwood floor of my father's study, scrubbing until my knuckles bled. Richard, my father, sat in his armchair, swirling a glass of scotch, his eyes sharp and calculating. He had spilled the drink on purpose. I knew that even then, but the rules of our household were simple. Girls clean, boys conquer. Hunter, my brother, lounged on the sofa, laughing at some video game, his feet resting on the table I had just polished. "You missed a spot, Alyssa," my father said softly, his voice low and cruel. Not a shout, not a scream. He preferred the subtlety of public humiliation. He loved to see the light go out of my eyes, to watch me shrink in his presence. It was his theater. When Grandpa Samuel tried to intervene, Richard's voice became a whip. "Touch that rag, old man, and I'll put you in a state home so fast you won't even have time to pack your pills." I scrubbed harder, my arms trembling, because I believed then that my value was measured by how much I could endure. The sharp clink of the bank's vault door brought me back to the present. I opened my eyes. I was no longer a 12-year-old girl kneeling on the floor. I was the woman holding a legacy, holding the match to ignite a carefully constructed revenge. The director placed a thick file on the table in front of me. "Your grandfather didn't just open a savings account, Miss Mercer," he said. "In 1982, he established a Totten Trust. He was an early investor in Apple and Microsoft. Every dividend, every gain, was funneled back into this portfolio, untouched for 40 years. He turned the document toward me. The current value of the trust, legally payable to me, was $12,400,000. I stared at the number. $12,400,000. Black and absolute. I thought of the champagne bucket, the cold sting of my wet hand, my father laughing into the microphone as he declared this fortune trash. He had held $12 million in his hand and thrown it away, blinded by arrogance. "Is there anyone else listed on the account?" I asked, my voice calm, measured. "No, Miss Mercer," the director said. "It's entirely yours." I touched the dried, ruined passbook. It wasn't just money. It was a weapon. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where to aim. The room felt too quiet after the director finished speaking. $12,400,000. The number didn't feel real. It didn't explode in my head the way people imagine money does. There was no rush, no joy, no sudden fantasy of yachts or champagne or revenge speeches. What I felt instead was clarity. Sharp, cold clarity. I had spent my entire life being told I was nothing. Too soft. Too quiet. Too weak. And yet here I was, sitting in a leather chair inside a private bank vault, holding something my father had never truly possessed, control. The director cleared his throat gently, like he was afraid to startle me. "We can begin the transfer process whenever you're ready, Miss Mercer." I nodded slowly. "I don't want to move it yet." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "Of course. We'll secure the account under your name immediately. Full confidentiality." As he spoke, my mind drifted, not to the future, but to the past. To my grandfather. Samuel Mercer was never loud. He never demanded attention. He didn't raise his voice or slam doors or command rooms the way my father did. He simply noticed me. And when you grow up invisible, being noticed feels like oxygen. I remembered sitting beside him on the back porch of the cottage, the one my father later called that useless shack. The ocean air always smelled like salt and pine. Grandpa Samuel would sip his tea slowly and say things like, "Watch people carefully, Alyssa. The loudest ones usually have the most to hide." At the time, I thought he was just talking about strangers. I didn't realize he was warning me about my own father. The director slid the documents back into the file. "We'll keep everything exactly as it is. When you're ready, we'll move at your pace." "Thank you," I said quietly. As I stood to leave, my legs felt strangely steady. Not shaky. Not weak. Steady, like something inside me had finally locked into place. Outside, Boston was gray and cold. I zipped my coat tighter around myself and walked down the steps of the bank like I hadn't just discovered a fortune. Like I was still the same invisible nurse heading home after a long shift. But I wasn't. Not anymore. Luke didn't look up when I walked through the apartment door. Our place was small, barely enough space for 2 people and a lifetime of quiet routines. The kitchen island was buried under printed spreadsheets, legal documents, and 3 empty coffee cups. Luke was hunched over his laptop, jaw tight, fingers moving fast. I watched him for a moment before speaking. This was the man I married. Not flashy, not loud, but dangerous in the way only deeply intelligent people can be. Luke wasn't just a data analyst, he was a forensic architect of secrets. He didn't build things. He dismantled lies. It's worse than I thought, he said finally, turning the screen toward me. I stepped closer. Worse how? It's not an empire, Alyssa, he said flatly. It's a Ponzi scheme. Bridge loans stacked on ego. Smoke and mirrors. I stared at the screen. Red numbers. Red flags. Red everywhere. This mansion in Newport? He tapped a file. Foreclosure proceedings started 3 weeks ago. My breath caught. 3 weeks. The family trust he brags about? Another tap. Empty. Completely drained. I felt my hands curl into fists. All those dinners. All those speeches. All those nights he laughed at me for being bad with money. Luke continued, voice calm but lethal. He's cycling the same $50,000 through 6 shell accounts to fake liquidity. And here's the best part. He pulled up another document. The IRS is auditing him. Notice of deficiency sent last month. I sank into a chair. My father wasn't powerful. He was drowning. And suddenly everything made sense. The cruelty. The desperation. The way he had grabbed my grandfather's passbook and thrown it away without even opening it. He didn't want to humiliate me. He needed money. My phone rang. His name lit up the screen. Richard Mercer. Luke froze.
He didn't speak.
He just nodded once. I put the phone on speaker. Alyssa, my father said, like nothing had happened. No apology. No hesitation. Just entitlement wrapped in confidence. I've been thinking about that little shack your grandfather left you. The cottage. I corrected softly. Yes. That, he said dismissively. I spoke with my real estate attorney. We can liquidate it quickly. My stomach tightened. I'll handle the sale, he continued. Get you fair market value and reinvest it into the family business so you actually see a return. Actually. Like I had never earned anything myself. You're a nurse, honey, he added. You don't understand property taxes or maintenance. I'm trying to save you from a headache. Luke met my eyes. This wasn't concern. This was hunger. I'm not selling it, Dad, I said. Silence. Then his voice dropped. You listen to me, he snarled. That old man was mentally incompetent when he signed that deed. My blood ran cold. I have witnesses ready to testify you manipulated a senile geriatric into handing over family assets, he continued. If you don't sign the transfer paperwork by Friday, I'll sue you for elder abuse. My heart pounded, but my voice didn't shake. I understand perfectly, I said.
Good, he snapped.
I'll have the papers sent over. The call ended. Luke exhaled slowly. He's desperate, Luke said, a sharp smile forming. And desperate men make mistakes. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of my father. I was ready. I waited exactly 24 hours before calling him back. 24 hours of silence, and I could almost hear the panic beginning to coil in my father's mind. Desperation is a language, and it speaks loudly to those who know how to listen. I didn't call to confront him. I called to perform. To step into the role I had perfected for 15 years. The scared, naive, incompetent daughter he thought he had created.
Dad.
I whispered when he picked up. My voice trembled, just enough. I'm sorry I hung up yesterday. I didn't know what to say. You should be sorry, he snapped. But even as he said it, the sharp edge in his voice was duller. He was listening now. That was all that mattered. It's not just the cottage, I continued, letting my voice pitch perfectly to the frequency of helpless panic. I went to the bank. The passbook, it's not empty. I don't know what to do. They said it's mine, but I don't understand taxes, and the IRS, what if they come after me? I could almost feel him calculating. Slowly, greed replaced anger. He smelled weakness, and that made him reckless. How much? He asked, his voice dropping, betraying a hunger I hadn't heard before. $12 million, I choked out. But, Dad, I don't know what to do. The bank manager talked about federal audits and capital gains taxes. I think I could lose half of it. I don't know how to hide it. I could almost hear him salivating. He believed every word. The inheritance was bait, and he had bitten. He had finally forgotten the daughter. He was only thinking about the money. Listen carefully, Alyssa, he said, his tone suddenly shifting from desperate to smooth, polished, confident, the kind of fake calm he always used in front of boardrooms and charity dinners. Do not sign anything with the bank. Do not speak to any lawyers. Bring the paperwork to me. I'll shelter it under the family trust. We can classify it as a pre-existing asset. Complicated, yes. But I can make the tax liability disappear. I'm doing this for you, sweetheart. To protect you. Protect me? I thought, lips curling into the tiniest, cold smile.
No, Dad.
You're trying to protect yourself. Can we tonight? I asked innocently. No, he said too quickly. He needed time to prepare. Fake documents. Witness statements. The illusion of legality. I have the Man of the Year Gala in Boston on Saturday. VIP suite, he continued, pacing the floor as I imagined. We'll sign there. I'll announce the expansion of the family fund. It'll look completely legitimate. Everything he said confirmed it. He wanted an audience. He wanted the glory of pretending to be the savior, the genius. He didn't know he was walking into the trap I had spent decades preparing. Okay, thank you, Dad. Thank you for fixing this, I whispered, my voice dripping with the exact submission he craved. That's what fathers are for, he said, and the line clicked dead. I hung up and Luke looked at me, not with fear, not with hesitation, just that cold, knowing smile that matched the fire rising in my chest. Do you understand? I asked him.
I do, he said.
Now we just set the stage. We spend the next 24 hours preparing, not panicking, not hesitating. This wasn't about panic, this was about precision. We didn't hire lawyers to fight the sale of the cottage. We hired a graphic designer to forge exactly what my father expected, a portfolio of investment documents, complete with the official letterhead, fonts, and headers. Every detail had to be perfect, so he wouldn't suspect a thing. When the documents were ready, I held them in my hands and felt power. Not the dizzying, careless power of a child throwing tantrums. This was the power of the invisible becoming unstoppable. By the time I dialed his number again, I wasn't Alyssa Mercer, the woman who had saved a ruined passbook from a champagne bucket. I was the scared 12-year-old girl who had spilled scotch in his study years ago. Every word, every hesitation, every tremor in my voice was a performance crafted to perfection.
Dad.
I whispered again. I really don't know what to do. He snapped immediately, but this time he was sharp, hungry, arrogant, and blind. Bring the documents. I'll handle it. Protect the family. Protect you. I let my voice catch. I can't. They said the bank might report me. I think I'm in trouble. The bait was perfect.
I handed him exactly what he believed about me. Weak.
Stupid. Helpless. And at the same time, handed him exactly what he needed, the key to fix his sinking empire. I waited while he did the mental calculus, imagining him pacing, calculating every angle, the greed leaking out of him like oil. And that, Luke whispered, was when men make mistakes. I was ready to collect. Saturday arrived, and with it, the heavy weight of anticipation. The Fairmont Copley Plaza in Boston glimmered like a palace of light. Crystal chandeliers dripped golden reflections onto polished marble floors. The smell of perfume, polished shoes, and expensive leather filled the air. This was the world my father thrived in, a world of wealth, recognition, and shallow applause. But tonight, that world would be his cage. I didn't arrive quietly. I didn't slink to the back, pretending to be invisible. I walked through the crowd, shoulders back, head high, and red deep, striking red. The dress I wore cost more than my car, sculpted and perfect, every stitch a statement. Every eye flickered toward me, but I ignored them. I only had one target. Hunter was already near the bar, laughing too loudly, 3 drinks deep, lost in a performance of entitlement. He didn't see me. He never did, not really. My father, however, caught sight of me almost immediately. The smile on his face didn't falter, but I saw the subtle narrowing of his eyes, the first crack in the mask of control he wore like armor. He excused himself from the group he was charming, his 2 senators in tow, and met me at the side of the stage. "You're late," he hissed through gritted teeth, all the while maintaining a practiced, perfect smile for the photographers. "Do you have it?" "I have it," I said softly, holding out the blue leather presentation folder. The leather gleamed under the chandeliers, like the crown jewel of my grandfather's legacy. He snatched it, greed vibrating off him like heat. "Is it all there?" "Yes," I whispered. "The transfer authorizations. Power of attorney. Everything you asked for. It puts the entire $12 million under the control of the family trust. You just need to sign as the sole trustee." He opened the folder, flipping quickly through the papers. He didn't read the clauses, didn't examine the fine print, didn't notice the title. Affidavit of Historical Management and Sole Liability. All he saw was the signature line. A smart man would have paused. A smart man would have wondered why the dates went back 20 years, linking him retroactively to every shell company in the appendix. But my father wasn't smart. He was arrogant. Entitlement blinded him. He believed the world existed only for him, and that I, Alyssa Mercer, would never be a threat. He pulled a Mont Blanc pen from his pocket, a flourish for the cameras, a flourish to make himself feel powerful. "You did the right thing, Alyssa," he said, voice dripping with faux gratitude. Scribble. Scribble. Signature complete. Finally, he handed the folder back, dismissive, already turning toward the podium. "Go find a seat in the back," he ordered. "I have an announcement to make." I didn't retreat. I didn't disappear. I moved to the side, cameras catching my silhouette, unnoticed yet present. I photographed the signature page and hit send. 3 miles away, Luke received it. He attached it to the whistleblower complaint we had finalized days earlier and uploaded it to the DOJ's secure portal. I watched my father ascend the stage, the spotlight hitting him like a halo. The room quieted. Crystal glasses clinked softly. He opened the microphone, clearing his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced proudly, voice booming, "tonight, we launch a historic expansion of the Mercer Family Foundation. A $12 million investment in our city's future." He was confessing in real time. And he didn't even know it. My phone buzzed. Received IRS confirmation. Code 99 Alpha. Done. The massive LED screen behind him flickered. The foundation logo vanished. In its place, a Department of Justice seal stamped in bold red letters. Federal asset seizure in progress. Case 8842. Applause collapsed into shocked silence. The murmurs rose. Confused whispers filled the room. Richard turned slowly, confusion etched on his face. His mind, trained to dominate, could not reconcile what he was seeing. He was still smiling, still performing, still pretending. But the world he controlled with arrogance was slipping through his fingers in real time. The ballroom doors burst open. 6 IRS Criminal Investigation Division agents swept down the aisle. "Step away from the podium," Richard Mercer, the lead agent, ordered. He clutched the microphone, eyes wild. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes, sir. You're the sole trustee who just signed an affidavit accepting responsibility for 20 years of unreported offshore accounts," the agent replied calmly. His eyes found me across the room. Betrayal and horror collided in his gaze. "She tricked me, my daughter," he whispered. "Save it for the grand jury," I thought. Handcuffs snapped shut. Cameras flashed. The man who had thrown a champagne-soaked passbook into a bucket of ice was now reduced to a trembling figure in a rented tuxedo, stripped of wealth, pride, and dignity. But the night wasn't over. The VIP suite doors slammed, locking the next act into motion. Hunter appeared, sweat beading on his forehead, face purple with panic. "You ruined everything," he hissed. "It was already ruined," I said. "Come." I wasn't afraid anymore. He lunged, a serrated steak knife in hand. The moment had shifted from strategy to raw instinct. Luke moved like a shadow, catching Hunter's wrist, twisting, snapping. The knife skidded across the marble floor. When the agents finally forced the door open, my brother was on the ground, sobbing, not from pain, but from irrelevance. I looked at Luke.
Calm.
Steady. The storm had passed. Justice was done. 3 weeks later, Newport smelled like salt and fresh coffee. I sat on the porch of the cottage. My cottage, the one my grandfather had left me, the one my father had tried to steal. The ivy I had painstakingly trimmed framed the edges of the porch. The roof was repaired. The windows gleamed. This place was no longer a shack. It was a home.
Mine.
The morning sun warmed my shoulders, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. Peace. Richard's bail had been denied. His assets frozen. His so-called empire liquidated. Every false claim, every shell company, every lie he had built over decades came crashing down. Hunter took a plea deal. No inheritance awaited him. Only work, responsibility, and the bitter taste of irrelevance. I held the affidavit in my hands. The pages were crisp, perfect, final. I lit it on fire. Flames danced and licked the paper, consuming the fear I had carried for decades. Smoke rose into the salty air, curling toward the sky like a signal. It's over. Luke sat beside me, calm, steady, always steady. He didn't speak at first. He didn't need to. The trust transfer was complete. The money, the $12.4 million, was legally, irreversibly mine. What do you want to do with it? He asked finally, his voice soft. I looked at the ocean. Waves rolled gently over the rocks, a rhythm I had always loved. Let it grow, I said. I'm still a nurse. I'm still Alyssa. The money isn't power. It's protection. Family isn't blood. Family is who stands with you when the vault opens. Luke nodded. He understood completely. I thought about the journey. The ruined passbook in a champagne bucket, the humiliation, the whispered threats, the sleepless nights of plotting. I thought about my grandfather and his quiet wisdom. Watch people carefully. The loudest ones have the most to hide. He had prepared me for this without ever speaking of it directly. And now I was free. I burned the last page of the affidavit, watched it turn to ash, and let the wind carry it out over the ocean. Freedom never felt heavier, cleaner, more satisfying. I knew I would never forget the look on my father's face when the IRS agents handcuffed him. But I also knew I wouldn't let it define me. I wasn't a mercer by arrogance, by greed, or by fear. I was a mercer by survival. And for the first time, I could smile without hesitation. Luke reached over, brushing a strand of hair from my face. We did it, he said softly. No, I said, shaking my head with a quiet smile. We survived it. And that's enough. The ocean roared below, timeless, patient, indifferent. I let the wind blow across my face and felt the weight of the past dissolve. The world was still loud, still chaotic, still full of people like my father, greedy, arrogant, unseeing. But here, on this porch, watching the waves crash against the shore, I was invisible no longer. I was Alyssa Mercer, survivor, nurse, and finally free.